and also with us Patrick Coburn of The Independent, whose books on Iraq include Muqtada al-Sadr and the Shia Insurgency. Obama's. On Tuesday we were talking about it. Just as everything was coming to a head in Baghdad, a quite different story over in the United States. At a military post outside Washington, the U.S. president and his Veep on hand to welcome home before Christmas the last U.S. troops after 9 years in Iraq.
The safe return of the colors of United States Forces Iraq to their rightful place in the United States of America. Job well done, gentlemen. Thank you.
This is a time to reflect on a generational journey, a journey of over 20 years that took us through 2 wars with Iraq to a new beginning in our relationship with Iraq. Because of the courage and resilience of our military and our partners, those in our own government, throughout the world and in Iraq, 30 million Iraqis are free today.
Abdulamir Alwan, do you agree that 30 million Iraqis are free today?
We are in the first step towards democracy, but this democracy built on wrong principles, and the Americans participate in doing these wrong principles. The sectarian division is not that much clear naturally, but when they build the transitional governing council, they build it on sectarian division. And now we are facing the sequences of that. Or even a criminal issue changed to a sectarian issue, which is not true, actually. And because Mr. Hashimi himself accused 2 years ago to kill the 2 sons of a Sunni politician, who is Mithal al-Alusi. And even in this case, one of his accusations is to kill a Sunni politician who is Fawaz al-Jarba, a very prominent sheikh in Al-Mosul. So to insist putting all issues in a sectarian issue, we are on the first step towards democracy, and democracy allow us, like in France, you put President Jacques Chirac in front of court. The Israelis put Mr. Kassav in front of a judge. Even today in Britain, the captain of the England football team accused of racism, John Terry. So we like to see a real democracy, and any prominent political figure stand a trial to prove his innocence or to be indicted. That's how democracy works. But unfortunately, those who put in the corner try to play the sectarian card or accusations of different background, which is not true.
Okay, so let me just bring it.
Clear case, and the outcome is very simple. He go to the courtroom to prove his innocent. If he is, then everything all right. If he involved in all these very high, unacceptable, publicly and in democracy, so he should face the conclusion of 5 prominent judges of the Supreme Court in Iraq.
Okay, so you think that the vice president should be brought before the court? Let me just bring in at this point Patrick Coburn.
Why not? Why not? Mr. Chirac stand the court last month.
Patrick Coburn, do you think that you just heard Mr. Alwan spell out the sectarian hurdles, but he says that Iraq is on the road to democracy. Do you agree?
Well, I was talking to the Iraqi foreign minister, Harsha Zabari, who was a couple of weeks ago. He said, well, the problem is, you have democracy. To have democracy in Iraq, you need rather more Democrats than there seem to be around. And I think that that's true. Iraq is divided between these ethnic and communal groups. The Americans exacerbated this by institutionalizing it and pretending that they'd created a genuine power-sharing structure when they hadn't really. Could I just to pick up another point about this supposed assassination attempt against al-Maliki just at the end of last month? I was in Baghdad at the time and was just close by after the bomb went off, and I looked at the site, and it really was, by Iraqi standards, quite a small bomb. Maliki normally goes around Baghdad, or the Green Zone, in a very heavily armored convoy. It's difficult to believe that this really was an assassination attempt, and if it was a very poorly organized one. So I think that this is being used, and these bodyguards' confessions are being used to precipitate a crisis quite deliberately at this moment.
I want to pick up. I want to pick up on what you said, Patrick Coburn, with Jolyon Haworth about could the Americans have done it differently in helping set up the system that is now?
Oh, they could have done it very differently. First of all, they could have had a plan, and after the Iraq invasion, after the military part was over, it was quite clear that there was absolutely no plan at all. The initial plan was to get out.
Wait, let's roll back the clock 12 months. Yeah. Everyone was hailing the fact that there was this general election, high turnout, and that for all of its imperfections, people took part in the process.
Yeah, well, there was the beginning of a political process, there's no doubt about that, and that has actually happened. So one of the reasons why all of these bombings have reduced is that there is a political process in place. But I don't think it has many of the hallmarks of a democracy as we would understand it. For a start, the elections were in March of last year, and the government wasn't formed until December. And throughout that entire period, all of the major players, but prominent among them Maliki, were jostling for position and trying to stitch up whatever deals they could in order to create a viable government. And Iyad Alawi, who had actually won the election in terms of number of seats, was progressively just sidelined. So what was put together at the end of last year, in December 2010, was a notional government of national unity, because that was the only way you could put a government together that would, command a majority within the assembly. So I don't think that there was much cause for celebration at that stage, because all that had happened was a political process was set in motion. Now, I think that what Maliki has been doing, and the signs are really quite alarming, that this was precisely the sort of stuff we heard when Saddam Hussein took over in 1979. There had been plots against the party, there had been plots against this, plots against that, and Saddam Hussein took his cabinet members and formed a firing squad and literally shot the members of the cabinet that they disagreed with. That is obviously not going to happen here, but the parallels are not that, dissimilar.
Dave Clark?
And I think if the Vice President was expecting a fair trial on these accusations, then the confessions of his bodyguards wouldn't have been televised 48 hours after their arrest. The sequence of events is extremely fast. Almost like it was pre-planned, and I think Patrick may have a good point about the relative incompetence of this bomb attack. People who want to kill people in Iraq have had plenty of years of experience in how to build a bomb, and by all accounts, this particular one, and obviously we have Patrick's pretty direct account of this, it's not a particularly terrifying attack. Coming back to the idea that is Iraq divided, well, the Vice President now, being a Sunni Arab, is in Erbil in a Kurdish city, because if he was in an area where the security forces were loyal to Maliki, he could expect to be arrested fairly swiftly.
All right, let's look at a few of the remarks that we found on Twitter. Goldberg Silverstein wrote, Iraq left alone for 3 days, already on the verge of civil war, and people say the U.S. presence is a bad thing? Are you out of your hippie minds? That's what he wrote. While Cleo the Leo, she points to the fact that Obama's gotten a bump in the polls recently, saying, I think speculation about Obama's rise in the polls forgetting one very important factor, his promise kept in Iraq. Jolyon Haworth, the idea for most Americans is just to turn the page and forget about it as quick as possible?
I think so at this point, yes. I mean, we've been through a horrendously brutalizing debate within the United States over the last 8-9 years, And there is very little evidence that the invasion itself was well thought through, that the aftermath was well conducted. We're lucky that the surge, for a variety of reasons which actually had not directly to do with the surge, has produced a situation which is manageable and has allowed the Americans to get out. But I think the American people, overwhelmingly in all of the opinion polls, are happy to put this one behind them. However, I don't think they're going to be able to, because Iraq has never been governed effectively throughout its history since 1920. It's always been this patchwork of these three very different areas which do not get on with one another. The only person who could make Iraq work was Saddam Hussein, and he did it by a rule of terror. Now, that's not sort of a terribly negative prediction for the future, but things are not looking good. Things are not looking good at all.
Things are not looking good, and then there's the issue of Iraq's place in the wider region. At that White House sit-down last week, Barack Obama, as we said earlier, praising Maliki for an inclusive government that he had. He also praised the Iraqi prime minister and even gave him the benefit of the doubt on Syria, where Baghdad is balked at backing tougher sanctions so far.
Even if there are tactical disagreements between Iraq and the United States at this point in how to deal with Syria, I have absolutely no doubt that these decisions are being made based on what Prime Minister Maliki believes is best for Iraq, not based on considerations of what Iran would like to see.
Do you agree, Dave Clark, that Nouri al-Maliki is his own man, and is that exactly what Barack Obama means when he says it?
I think the fact that he brought up Iran by name suggests that he doesn't wholly believe that. I don't think, as some do, that Maliki is just an Iranian agent. I think he is an Iraqi nationalist, and he is he is not in the direct pay of the mullahs, but he has to take into account the opinions of all the powerful people in his region. And it is clear that in terms of the broader troubles we're seeing in the Middle East at the moment, that Tehran and Baghdad would not like to see the Alawite fall in Damascus, because any state based on majority rule in Syria would be a Sunni one, and he would feel surrounded.
Patrick Coburn, you say you were in Iraq 3 weeks ago. What was the general mood on that score when it came to Iran on the one hand and the United States on the other?
Well, I think that what worried people was that if the government falls in Syria and you have a Sunni Islamist regime take over, that will be a bad blow to Iran. They will want more influence in Iraq. Some people are very worried about this. Others saying no, that this is exaggerated, that the Iranians aren't going to have got most of what they want already. They're not going to push it further. But also, I think one has to see this in the context of sharpening differences between Sunni and Shia throughout the region. There's a lot of feeling in Iraq about the suppression of the Arab Spring by the Shia majority in Bahrain, by the Sunni ruling royal family. They see what's happening in Syria. So all that has sort of created political agitation and made people feel that the whole region is becoming more unstable, and that's going to affect Iraq. And the parties inside Iraq all have their foreign patrons, and when they feel under attack, they tend to look for support from those foreign patrons. So there is a feeling that instability is growing.
So everyone with their own patrons. Abdul Amir Alwan, what do people that you speak to from Iraq think of the Arab Spring in that context? Is it something that just is foreign to Iraqis at this point?
There are several differences between each case of the Arab Spring. In the Syrian issue exactly, because it's a neighboring country, the Iraqi understanding, first of all, if things left alone, it's either lead to civil war in Syria, which affects Iraq very badly, or it will lead to foreign troops invasion, and also it will lead to affect Iraq very badly. So the main issue for the Iraqis, the Syrian issue. And the third factor, there is a very widespread feeling that the people behind the Syrian opposition are the Saudis and the Qataris. And the Saudis and Qataris behave in a sectarian way, and they support the opposition for a sectarian reason. And the shadow of the conflict between Saudis and the Iranians is affecting all the area of the Middle East, which might lead to a very dangerous religious war, which all should avoid if they are wise enough. But because these two governments, especially the Saudis and Qataris, they want Bashar al-Assad to fall down in any price, so they don't care what will be the result in Syria.
Okay, let me just bring in Dave Clark on this, because we're almost.
It is very important.
Let me just bring in Dave Clark on this, because we're almost out of time. You listen there to Abdullah Amir Alwan, and the old fault lines of the Middle East and the Arab world seem to still be intact when you hear that, what he says.
Yes, I mean, if I was to crudely summarize what you just said, and I hope you won't find this insulting, but you're saying the trouble with those Sunnis is that they're sectarian, which is an ironic way of putting it. But Qatar is involved in a lot of things around the Middle East. So when I was in Libya during the Arab Spring there, and the Qataris were very clearly behind the revolution there. A lot of their money was in there, a lot of their special forces. I've not seen any evidence of their troops on the ground in Syria, but obviously there are cross-border interferences, and that's something that has to be borne.
So Iraq, would you say, is outside of everything that's happening elsewhere?
Well, in a sense, it's a few stages ahead of what's happening elsewhere. It was a country that was ruled by a minority, and then it went through convulsions, and now its majority is, in a kind of paranoid way, trying to consolidate its new rule. And I would not be surprised in a few years' time to see the reverse happening, where the Sunni majority of Syria overthrows the Alawite minority that ruled it, and we go through a similar kind of procedure in reverse in the sectarian terms.
All right, I want to thank you, Dave Clark. I want to thank Julian Howarth, Abdullah Amir Alwan for joining us from London, and from Cork in Ireland, Patrick Coburn, and thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Next, we've got Business, and that's hosted by Marcus Carlson.
Smoking rates drop around the world, Indonesians are lighting up more than ever. This week, Health heads to Jakarta to investigate a disturbing trend: children under 10 years of age refusing to kick the habit.
Don't miss Health, Sunday 11:45 a.m. Paris time on France 24.